Junior Motorsports could still be looking to make more starts in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025 and more partners come in. They also could go full-time in 2026, and it looks like Dodge could be headed back to NASCAR in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple of days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2025 3D system scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Paint schemes are right in my opinion. Not the biggest fan of the color, but it's really good to see if 3D Systems will sponsor Cole Custer this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Bilicki's 2025 Flat Tech scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta. Schemes are right in my opinion. Colors look decent. Glad to see Josh Bilicki does have a new sponsor for the weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Allgaier's 2025 Protect Our Melon scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta. This is very similar to Ross Chastain and Chad Chastain schemes at DGM Racing. I think it does look pretty solid though. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend at Atlanta. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's updated 2025 Seabest scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Compared to the original one that he ran at Daytona, this one I think looks a lot better. I think the white number makes a lot more sense on the car, and I think it does look pretty good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2025 Yahoo scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I really like the paint scheme. It's simple, it's creative, the purple works really good on this one. Definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Parker Resla's 2025 Suave scheme that we'll see in select race in 2025, including this weekend at Atlanta. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. I do like the look of it. I think that Alpha Prime, or the team he's driving for, did a really good job on it. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Hill's 2025 Bennett Transportation scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta. I think the scheme looks really good. It's better than the original Bennett Transportation scheme that we saw, I believe, this weekend at Daytona. It looks really good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Atlanta. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Nick Leisch's 2025 Scott Ricks Throwback scheme that we'll see at the Darlington Throwback Race. This is a throwback course of Scott Ricks' 2005 and 2006 paint schemes. This looks really good in my opinion. I think SS Greenlight absolutely knocked this one out of the park. It looks really good, it looks simple, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Preece's 2025 Gavalia scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. This course in association with the Kroger brand. I gotta say, this car looks alright in my opinion. It's not the best looking one I've seen from Ryan Preece so far this year. The car looks okay. Good to see him have a new sponsor though for the weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Zane Smith's 2025 City of Refuge scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta. Schemes are right in my opinion. Do like the colors overall. I think Front Row did a pretty solid job on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Atlanta Motor Speedway this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tony Breidinger's 2025 Women's Sports scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta or tomorrow. I gotta say, scheme looks alright. I do like the colors overall. I do think that Tricon did a pretty solid job. We'll see how she can do this weekend at Atlanta. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2025 Columbia scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I absolutely love this paint scheme. It gives those Miami vibes, those Miami Vice vibes that we kind of look for when it comes to the Columbia scheme. Overall, I really like the look of it. It looks retro, looks classic. Definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend at Atlanta. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2025 Moose Fraternity scheme that we'll see in select race in 2025, including this weekend. Looks very similar to last year's scheme, but it's great to see a Moose Fraternity is back working with Ross Chastain in 2025. I think it does look solid. I do think it looks pretty good, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Celsius. As it was confirmed a couple days ago that Celsius will sponsor Christian Eckes for 5 more races in 2025. They're also going to sponsor AJ Allmendinger with Kaulig Racing for 7 more races in 2025 as well. Celsius has been associated with AJ Allmendinger for many, many years at Kaulig Racing, and they of course have associated with a lot of other drivers, including Jeb Burton as well, and also I think some other drivers like Corey LaJoie as well. Overall, it's good to see Celsius stepping up their branding for the remainder of the year. Glad to see they'll be sponsoring Christian Eckes and AJ Allmendinger for quite a few races in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the truck race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. As they have a new title sponsor for the event for next week, it's going to be called the EcoSave 200. I believe this will be the first time that EcoSave has sponsored a truck series event, if I'm not mistaken. So it's really cool they're going to have the chance and opportunity to be a first-time sponsor in 2025. It's a pretty big sponsorship deal, all things considered. Glad to see that EcoSave will be working with the truck race of Las Vegas, a really big deal for them. And it's awesome to see it will be sponsoring the race at Las Vegas next weekend. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. As it was reported by NASCAR Insights, aka Trey Ryan, the Hendrick Motorsports has now won in 40 consecutive seasons in NASCAR Cup history, going all the way back to 1985. They are the only team in NASCAR Cup history to have 40 consecutive seasons with winning in Cup competition. This is not a shock and surprise. Hendrick Motorsports, we know, has been extremely dominant. They've only had one season, actually since 1986. They've only had one winless season in NASCAR Cup history, and that was 1985. And I think that Hendrick Motorsports will be winning many races for many years to come, and it just shows that Hendrick continues to be, even after 4 decades, they continue to be this amazing powerhouse. They won their 300th race not too long ago, and it's very likely in the next 5 to 10 years that they're going to reach 400 wins in NASCAR Cup competition. So I think it's a massive deal for Hendrick Motorsports to continue winning as many races as they've been winning. Congratulations to them on winning in 40 consecutive seasons. It's absolutely incredible to see them continue their dominance in the sport. A pretty awesome and great thing nonetheless to see. They continue to have a dominant time in NASCAR competition as they just won in 40 consecutive seasons. Really awesome stuff in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar lap counts. As it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that IndyCar has updated the lap totals for the races this weekend for IndyCar. Starting off with Long Beach, the race has been increased from 85 laps up to 90 laps. Then you got Mid-Ohio that's gone up, I believe, from 85 laps also to 90 laps. They're going from 80 laps to 90 laps. Next, Iowa has increased another 25 from 250 up to 275 laps. For Toronto, which is, I believe, 85 laps, they've increased that to 90 laps. And for the national season finale, we'll go from 206 laps to 225 laps. This could have some effect when it comes to time windows and time constraints, considering there is going to be a time window they're going to have to go up against, unfortunately, and that could really play a major role and affect how quick they can get the races in. But I do think it's really good to see, nonetheless, that IndyCar will have a solid amount of laps that they're going to have. I think adding extra laps at racetracks like Iowa and Nashville does make a lot of sense, and for Long Beach especially, I think it's a really good decision as well. I think it's interesting numbers for sure. Glad to see it will be increasing some lap lengths for some of the races because, in my opinion, I do think they should increase it a little bit because I do think overall it's a good decision to go ahead and give some of these races a little bit longer of a race, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Aaron's. As it was confirmed a couple days ago, that Aaron's will be back in NASCAR for the first time since 2015 or 2016, and they are going to sponsor Farmer Motorsports for select races throughout the 2025 season. They're going to sponsor Todd Gillen this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway and sponsor Zane Smith for around 7 or 8 races in NASCAR Cup competition this year. Aaron's have been a loyal sponsor of NASCAR competition from the early 2000s with Michael Waltrip all the way to the mid to late 2010s when, of course, Michael Waltrip Racing ended up closing, but they did associate Michael Waltrip in the final few years. He did run some one-offs from 2016 all the way to around 2018. And I think it's good that Aaron's is back in the sport for the first time in a long time. They were rumored to be coming back to the sport, so it is good to see that it's officially true. They're going to be back working in the sport and working with Todd Gillen and Zane Smith later this year. And it's good that they're going to be, and I got to say, the paint schemes for both the cars do absolutely look really solid and very, very good. And I think having Todd Gillen and Zane Smith, 2 up-and-coming drivers, work with the Aaron's brand is huge. Really exciting and pretty awesome to see that Aaron's will get to work with Farmer Motorsports in 2025. I think it's awesome, and I think it's great to see that we're going to see Farmer Motorsports have the chance and opportunity to have the Aaron's brand in 2025. Really awesome stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Keith McGee. As there was reported early Wednesday by Joseph Straley from TobyChristie.com that Keith McGee has moved from the number 22 truck to the number 2 truck for this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He will drive the number 2 for Ram Brothers Racing this weekend. Keith McGee, I believe, has not made a start so far in 2025. He does have a couple starts scheduled with this team in the program this year, and this will be the first of 2 or 3 races that have been confirmed for him. He originally was going to be behind the wheel of the number 22 truck, but the 2 truck, I believe, is in a really good position in owner's points compared to the 22, even though the 22 was able to have a really solid run at Daytona, finishing inside the top 10, as Ram looks to get a lot stronger going throughout the year and season. Hope Keith McGee can have a really good run, but to be honest and real with y'all, I'm not expecting much in Keith McGee, unfortunately. I think Keith is not an awful race car driver, but he's not a guy that I really expect much from, so I do think he's going to struggle a little bit overall, but I'm glad to see he'll get to drive the 2 truck, but I don't think he'll run a lot this year because he's going to have some other commitments, some other things he's going to have to do. I think it's good, though, that he will get the opportunity to do some races in 2025 with Ram Brothers Racing Organization. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hill Motorsports. As it was announced on Tuesday late morning going to early afternoon, the Hill Motorsports will be joining the ARCA East Series full-time in 2025, with Timmy Hill being the full-time driver behind the wheel. This is definitely shocking, but I think it's not also that surprising considering that they have backed off doing their truck series program. They did run the truck race at Daytona, but the plan for the organization and team is to not run the full truck series season. They are going to have a part-time schedule this year as they're going to put full focus on the ARCA East program this year. I gotta say, this actually could be a really solid year for Hill Motorsports. When you look at ARCA East going into this year, and this is no disrespect to the ARCA East series, there's not a lot of competition currently at the moment right now. And having a team like Hill Motorsports, which they aren't the fastest organization in truck series competition, but they're not always slow either, I think having a decent team who could really build around and make that team strong and maybe down the road have a development program, that could absolutely be huge for the future of this team and organization. I think it'd be good for the sport to have Hill Motorsports go down there and be very solid and extremely successful. I hope they can run really well in ARCA East this year, because I do think if they can have a good program, they could be a very solid team to watch out for. And I think, like I said, having a good team they can revolve around and get some development maybe down the road working with them, I think that is absolutely huge. So I think it's really awesome to see nonetheless as well that they're going to be racing in ARCA this year. I would have to also expect they're going to do ARCA on some of those main ARCA races as well, especially with the combination races that are going to happen. So that's probably going to be going down the road as well. But nonetheless, really happy and glad to see that ARCA East will have a new team. They're more competition, especially. Hopefully we'll get to see Timmy Hill and Hill Motorsports run extremely strongly in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Michael McDowell. As it was confirmed on Tuesday morning that Michael McDowell will drive the 07 for Spire Motorsports in the Craftsman Truck Series this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He will join teammates Kyle Busch, who will make his first of 5 scheduled starts this weekend in the number 7 truck, Raj Groove and Andres Perez-Laura in their respective trucks. Michael McDowell did make his first truck start this past weekend at Daytona International Speedway in the 07 truck, where unfortunately did not get the finish that I think he deserved and finished around 28th to 29th position. I do expect that Michael McDowell is going to be more a factor this week, and considering that Spire Motorsports program at the track of Atlanta has been a little bit quicker than they've been at Daytona International Speedway. And I think Michael McDowell with a little bit more experience too at this track mattering a lot in regards to talent. I do think that Michael McDowell will be a solid factor, and I think he will be somewhat of a contender for sure at Atlanta Motor Speedway this weekend. I could see Michael McDowell having a good chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. If they could bring the pace and speed and have the equipment that can be up front, I think that McDowell will definitely have a good chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. I think the Spire team's going to have a truck that's capable of going to victory lane, and I do expect for this team to be very solid and really strong. I like the 07 truck especially. It's a really good truck. It's definitely a very competitive truck as well nonetheless, and great to see nonetheless that we will see Michael McDowell have the chance and opportunities. I do believe that Michael McDowell will be a solid factor, and I think he will definitely be a serious contender. I think he minimum gets top 10, but he might also get a win or even a top 5 for sure, definitely this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey LaJoie. As it was officially confirmed on Tuesday evening that Corey LaJoie will once again drive the 0-1 for Rick Ware Racing this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. This will be the second of many starts he has scheduled for the Rick Ware Racing organization, of course, in 2025. Corey LaJoie, of course, is able to make the Daytona 500, and he had a very solid and really strong performance in Daytona 500. While he didn't get the finish that I think he deserved, he had one of the fastest cars in the field and got himself inside the top 5 and even led laps in the event as well. Corey LaJoie could definitely be a serious factor and contender to win this weekend if the cards could play in his favor. If he doesn't get caught up in some sort of wreck and some sort of incident, I could see that Rick Ware car, especially with them having the Roush alliance that they're going to have, I could definitely see Corey LaJoie having a really strong run in that car. He's also got a really nice look at sponsorship for the weekend as well. And I do think that LaJoie, say what you want to say about LaJoie, he had one of his best Cup performances he has ever had. And I go back to 2022, the race that Chase Elliott won. We all forget that Corey LaJoie was a major factor to go to victory lane in that event. So I think that LaJoie will have a really good chance and opportunity to win. We're still waiting on what the rest schedule is going to look like for Corey LaJoie. He's going to be doing some stuff at Amazon, it sounds like, in the second half of the year, which that's been confirmed at this point for the pre-race show. But I do think LaJoie will be a solid factor, and I think he'll have a really solid chance and good opportunity to go to victory lane. I like the car he's with. I think it's a solid car. And I think that Corey LaJoie will be a solid factor to be up front. I think the speed will be there for the Rick Ware team. And I think that Corey LaJoie will have a solid chance and a pretty strong opportunity. I think he definitely will be competitive for sure this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway with Rick Ware Racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ford. It was reported by Adam Stern earlier this week that Ford says NASCAR remains an important pillar for the Blue Oval, so that they will remain part of the series going forward and they don't plan to leave NASCAR anytime soon. This comes off the bat of some rumblings and rumors over the course of the last couple months about the future manufacturers in NASCAR and potentially one of these big OEMs leaving. That's one thing that Brad Gosselin brought up, along with the potential outcome of the lawsuit going on currently at the moment. One of the things that NASCAR is really afraid of is losing a big manufacturer. And I think it's really good to hear that Ford is going to be committed long term. Now, one thing that Ford has really needed to work on, in my opinion, though, for a very long time, if they're going to be staying committed long term, is a really strong development program. One thing that Toyota and Chevy have up on Ford currently at the moment is their development program. When you look at Chevrolet, you've got guys like Carson Quaffle, Connor Zillage, Christian Eckes, Nick Sanchez, Roger Carruth. And for Toyota, you've got Gio Ruggiero, Tennessee Tony Breininger, Isabel Robusto, Corey Heim. Other big names in the series that are over there. Brent Cruz, for instance. Their Toyota program is really stout with a lot of great talent. And then you look at Ford. Ford, they've improved a little bit, but they're still way behind. They've improved that a little bit going into this year. They've added Chandler Smith from the Toyota stable from the past year. They've added Sam Mayer from Chevrolet. And they've also, of course, added Sheldon Creed from Toyota as well. So they've upgraded their brand as a little bit. But prior to this year, the biggest people in the Ford camp were Haley Deegan and Frankie Muniz. And maybe other people like Elaine Riggs. But that's pretty much it at this point. Ford does not have the strongest pipeline in regards to development, but I think with some of the new teams that have come in and some of the improvements I've seen for some of these teams, I think there definitely is a chance and possibly we could see a little bit of improvement going forward from Ford. But I think the big thing, like I've already mentioned, is going to have to be worked on is the development side of things. Because I think for Ford, that's going to be their key thing. Because while Ford has a lot of really good teams in Cup, like RFK Racing, which are a 3-car team now with Ryan Preece, Brad Keselowski, and Chris Buescher. Then, of course, you have Front Row that's really taken some big steps forward with Noah Gragson, Todd Gillen, and Zane Smith. You've obviously got Penske, who's won the last 3 straight championships. So that's one of the reasons why they're not going anywhere anytime soon. But I do think that when you look at Ford, there's going to be some changes that are probably going to happen in one of these organizations. You also got Rick Ware, too, with Cody Ware. And, of course, you have the other car that Corey LaJoie is going to be driving in quite a few events this year. So I do think when you look at Ford and their situation currently at the moment right now, their team that I think that really, and a manufacturer especially, that I do think is going to be committed long-term. The one thing I do have a little bit of concern on is the fact that there's definitely a little bit of a concern for sure in some areas about the future, the development side of things. But I do think, at least recently, Their development group has gotten a lot stronger and it's gotten a lot better. And overall, I do like to see they've gone ahead and added some new people in the development side of things, driver talent-wise. I do like some of the people that have been added in regards to development for the series over there, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox Sports. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Tuesday late morning that Fox Sports plans to continue using double box ads during green flags for every single green flag lap during Fox's Cup Series races on main Fox. Well, on Fox Sports 1, they are still going to have full screen commercials, but however, they plan to have a lot more side-by-side and triple the amount of side-by-side commercial breaks that are going to be taking place in 2025. This is a massive, massive positive. And one area that I think Fox has absolutely gotten things right, in my opinion. Now, I do think this is probably something written in the contract for the new TV deal. We kind of started seeing it at the end of 2024 with NBC, with their NBC broadcast on the super speedways. And I think you're starting to see that because we saw that with the CW as well. There weren't any full screen commercials, and you saw a lot more side-by-side. I've been saying this for a very, very long time, but these TV providers really need to get with the times, and they really need to get with the program, and I think at least Fox is finally realizing they're doing things the wrong way, and I think that NASCAR realizes saying, hey, you need to start showing a lot more side-by-side because people should not be missing the action. You don't miss action during NFL games. You don't miss action during MLB games. You don't miss action during NBA games or NHL games. You don't miss any of the action during the races for Formula One. And you don't miss action most of the time for IndyCar races. So why are we missing action for NASCAR races and missing big wrecks and missing big moments? I think having more side-by-side, you're not missing any of the action, and you're forcing people to see the ad, which I think is a good thing. What I think NASCAR has realized here is, hey, if we show a lot more side-by-side instead of going full screen, I think these advertisers are going to get a lot better bang for their buck, and they're going to be able to make a lot more money, along with NASCAR being able to make a lot more money as well, considering NASCAR took more of a money deal instead of a consumer deal for people in the sport, like IndyCar where they took less money for more exposure. NASCAR took more money but less exposure. But I think this is a major step in the right direction. I think it is a massive win for NASCAR, at least on the Fox side of things. I do think that they will continue to improve. I hope Fox can improve because their coverage has been very hit or miss in recent years, and we all know that their coverage definitely needs to be taking some big improvements overall. But I gotta say, this is a massive step in the right direction for Fox, and I think it's a massive step in the right direction for NASCAR. I think that these people need to get with the times, and they do need to get with the program on that front. So I'm really happy to see that they're planning to continue doing a lot more of the side-by-side coverages going forward and doing less of full-screen commercials. Oh, in the future, there could even be less side-by-side and more green flags shown without even commercials. But this is a major step in the right direction. Overall, in my opinion, I think this is a pretty massive and a pretty huge win. Very happy to see that Fox Sports is doing this going forward because I don't think we should be missing any of the action. I think having all side-by-side for most of the races is a really huge deal. Glad to see they're doing this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the ARCA Daytona TV ratings. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Tuesday afternoon that Fox got 1.16 million viewers for Saturday's Ride the Dente 200, the most watched ARCA event at the track since 2013, which had 1.507 million viewers. This is absolutely a huge number for Fox and ARCA as well. Now, a couple of things that do need to be noted here. Number one, this was on Big Fox, so that's definitely going to help in a pretty big way. Most ARCA races have not been shown on Fox. That 1.507 number, that race was aired on FS1 back in 2013, or even the Speed Channel back then, because it was still Speed Channel 2013, so it was on a cable channel, but still 1.16 is solid. There's also a couple other big factors. Number one, you had Elio Castroneves, who was running the event. You got a lot of IndyCar fans who were watching because of Elio Castroneves, and he also had the fact that you basically had another big factor being Cletus McFarland. Cletus McFarland, we're going to talk about in a video later today that you're going to see on the channel. Cletus McFarland brought a lot of eyes in, especially with streaming, and Cletus McFarland was a massive reason why a ton of people tuned into the ARCA race. While the race itself generally was not that good, and the racing quality just was not that good this weekend, I think this is a massive win for ARCA, and hope we going to forward down down the road. I don't think they're showing any more ARCA races outside of this one in Big Fox, but there's a couple truck races that are going on Big Fox. I believe Homestead is. I believe Michigan is later this year. I think a race near the end of the season also will be shown on Big Fox, and I think that could be big for Fox especially. So I really love the fact that Daytona is going to get the coverage that it's going to be needing, and I think that for ARCA, like I said, this is a huge win. You had a lot of big names in the race like Amber Balkan, who caused a lot of wrecks. Again, you had Cletus McFarland, you had Cody Dennison and Kamala, who's got a pretty big YouTube channel as well, and some people were tuning in because of that. So I think that definitely helped in a pretty big way, and I think that played a big factor as well. So I really love seeing this overall, and pretty happy and glad to see nonetheless that the ARCA Daytona race got some really good ratings. I think the viewership was really solid for the weekend. I think it's really good to see that the viewership can be really good if they put the effort and work into it. Very happy to see the ARCA Daytona TV ratings are really, really good from this weekend, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about an announcement. As there was a report by Joseph Straley from TobyChristie.com that apparently there is a team announcement that is scheduled for Sunday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So by the time many of you are watching this video, because it'll probably be later in the week, the announcement will probably have taken place. The big question is, what is this big team announcement that is going to be taking place? Could this have association with the rumor about Junior Motorsports maybe going NASCAR Cup Series racing full-time in 2026? That could certainly be a possibility for sure. Could this potentially be that Dodge rumor that we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit? That could certainly be a possibility. Or is it just a smaller organization and team that is making a move and making an announcement? Because it just says team announcement. Could this be a silly season announcement, perhaps for 2026? Could this be all of a sudden confirmation about Kyle Busch's future? Could this be confirmation about Daniel Suarez's future with Trackhouse Racing? We really don't know at this point. But I do think in regards to a team announcement, when you hear something in regards to a team announcement, you know it's probably a really huge and a pretty big deal. So I think this is something that we're going to have to pay attention to, because I do think that regardless of what this big announcement is, I think it's something to watch out for. Could we be getting confirmation of one of the teams that is switching to Dodge? Could we be getting an announcement about Thor Sport Racing maybe being that organization, a team that could be switching for 2026? We're just going to have to wait and see at this point, because there's still some questions on that front. Because when you hear a team announcement, you don't really know what it is. Is it a big sponsor deal? Is it a big sponsorship for 2025? Is it something to do with Red Bull? Is it going to be more races for Connor Zilic and Cup Brass? Because I'd have to think Connor Zilic is just making more than just one star. Who knows at this particular point? Is it going to be some of the OEP that's been in association? We're not entirely sure, but I think this will be a big announcement to watch out for, especially it seems like it's going to be a big deal. And if it's something big, we will cover it on this channel later this week before the Cup Series race takes place at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and probably have more updates on the confirmation of that coming really, really soon. Nonetheless, it's really awesome to see that there's a big announcement coming. We'll just, again, have to wait and see what the so-called big announcement is that's coming, because I don't have any indication anywhere, any details on it at this moment, but I think it's very much something that we probably should be paying attention to, because when you start hearing from people like Joseph Straley, there's a very good chance and likely possibility that it is a very big deal, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Xfinity Series Daytona TV ratings. As we're talking about the ratings from this past weekend on the CW, and they are absolutely huge, and it's a massive dub. According to Adam Stern, the CW drew 1.8 million viewers for Saturday's NASCAR Xfinity Series United Rentals 300, the best for a race in that series since Talladega in 2022, and the most watched season opener for an event at Daytona since 2020. This is a massive, massive number for many, many reasons, because people have talked about the fact that it's very hard to reach an audience, especially with a CW, because they're not able to stream the races on the app, and there's been some issues in certain areas of being able to get the races. Had that been able to be fixed, I think that this race could have had over 2 million viewers, which is absolutely huge for the Xfinity Series. But for the first official race on the CW, this is absolutely huge. But I think there's a couple big things that need to be talked about here in regards to the CW. Number one, I think the coverage was absolutely outstanding. I think that's one reason why the ratings for their first race were absolutely huge. The ratings were big because the coverage was really good. Parker Kligerman, Jay McMurray, and Adam Alexander had incredible and really huge chemistry. They worked together very, very well. They sounded good together, and they sounded like they know what they were talking about, and it felt like a modern broadcast. And the pit reporters, Kim Kuhn, Carla Gaypar, and Dylan Walsh, all sounded natural in their places as well. They had a really strong pre-race show. There was a lot of promotion from the CW for the Xfinity series, which can create really, really big stars going forward down the road. And I think having that kind of promotion can really, really grow the Xfinity series into something huge, considering Xfinity will not be the title sponsor in 2026. Promoting the series is really, really huge, and I think they're starting off on a really strong note. And if that broadcast is any indication of what the CW will be for the remainder of the year, what a modern broadcast could be, because one thing that does need to be noted is that is not the CW who's promoting it and the ones that are doing the production for. That's NASCAR during the production. It's just that the CW is the one publishing it. Which tells me there's a lot of excitement around the NASCAR production side of things, and I'm really excited for that group over there. I'm not as excited about the remote broadcast going forward, because that's something that's been talked about. There could be some remote broadcasts, which, to be honest, I'm not a massive and a really big fan of that. But I do think for the Xfinity series, having the ratings be that good for their first race is really, really huge. And I think it's a big win because it could make big stars going forward. And I think that everyone just had some really strong chemistry. I think the chemistry, like I said, that's a big thing for me, was so strong and so positive. And I think this relationship has started off on a really strong and really big note. I do wish there would be a way for races to be streamed on the app. I get they want people to go ahead and watch it live on TV, but some have not been able to reach that because some areas unfortunately don't have it. But if they can get that figured out, I think they're going to be in such a really good position long term that I think that the CW has a really good chance and opportunity to have success in their first year. And I think they're starting off on a solid note. If they get some of these kinks and some bugs they had, I think they're going to be in a great position. But for the CW, it just felt like a modern broadcast. That's the most important thing, is you want a modern broadcast. And I think that CW, for the most part, nailed it. The graphics look good. Everything about the broadcast to me was really, really good. There were some audio issues for some people. I didn't have those audio issues, but some people did. I know that. But I do think if they can get some of these kinks and some of these bugs figured out, I think that this could be a really strong relationship. And from what I saw, there was a huge win for Xfinity. To have almost 2 million people tune into the first race at Daytona is really awesome, and it's absolutely huge in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Daytona 500 ratings. As it was reported by Adam Stern on the Daytona 500 TV ratings for this past weekend, according to Adam Stern, Fox earned 6.761 million viewers for the Daytona 500. That is up 13% from last year's Daytona 500, which had 5.964 million. But keep in mind that was because the race was postponed to Monday. So still to have almost 6 million people tune in was really, really huge. Now, one thing to note from Adam Stern is that the race peaked at 7.959 million viewers around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I believe it was also noted by Adam Stern as well that had the race gone live all the way through without the rain delay taking place, this race could have drawn between 8 to 9 million viewers, which would have been about where NASCAR was in 2022. For the ratings to be around 7 million viewers for a race that was rain delayed by nearly 2 to 3 hours, and to still have nearly 7 million people tune in to the Daytona 500, which is the biggest event in NASCAR, I think that is still huge, and it just shows there is still a massive impact around the Daytona 500. Now, there are a couple pretty big factors that definitely really helped the ratings this year. Number one, Donald Trump showed up. A lot of people are very intrigued, but especially since Donald Trump is one of the biggest public figures in the United States, him being the president of the United States, there's going to be a lot of people that are part of that group and entourage that are definitely going to tune in and watch to see what Donald Trump is going to do, because there he did some pace laps in the Beast. He did do some pace laps around the track, but there's a couple other big reasons. Number one, you had the interest of some big names out there. You also, of course, had Helio Castroneves. A lot of the IndyCar crowd was watching to see how Helio Castroneves was doing. You also had Junior Motorsports, who we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit on what the future of that team could be in the NASCAR Cup Series. We were very intrigued to see how they were going to do. They were selling a lot of things, and Dale Jr., it just shows that Dale Jr., even for someone who has not been in a NASCAR Cup Series car at all since 2017, hasn't been full-time in nearly a decade at this point, it just shows there still is a lot of interest in the Junior brand and Dale Jr. and Junior Motorsports as well. I think the numbers, though, are solid, all things considered. I still think they can do a lot better. I think one thing that could really help them not have rain delays going forward is starting the races so late. And I get this time around, even with them moving up a little earlier, there still would have been rain. I know you can't control the weather, but having these later start times definitely plays a role in that. That's why I do think that there probably should be a 1 p.m. mandatory start time going forward for the Daytona 500. 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, by the way, should be the mandatory start time. Maybe cut down a little bit on the pre-race. I think that's one big big thing for me is that the pre-race may be a little bit too long. Because I think if you start the race a little bit earlier, you won. And I know that the Daytona has lights, but I think starting the race a little bit earlier could really, really help the Daytona 500 get the race in without rain issues. And yes, you may not get all 200 laps in, but I think we've seen it so much at this point now. Some have brought up maybe making a night race. No, let's not make it a night race, please, because weather could still be a factor at night. Look at 2021, for example. It took multiple hours after darkness to get the track dried, and people were not big fans of that. So I do think making the Daytona 500 start a little bit earlier could definitely help a little bit, but I do think it's still a very solid number, all things considered. It's still going to be the most watched NASCAR Cup race, most likely this year. I don't see any of the Amazon races doing bigger, and I certainly don't see Atlanta or COTA or any of those races coming up bringing huge numbers, so I expect this number to be big, and having a 13% increase is huge. We're expecting the numbers to be down this year all around because of the fact that they've moved a lot of races to cable this year with the new TV deal. Hopefully down the road we can incorporate having more of those broadcast races down the road. But in general, I think this is a positive start. Yes, the number could have been better, and unfortunately the weather really played a role in that, sadly. But overall, in general, I like to see the ratings that I see here, and it's good to see that the ratings were up a little bit from last year. Hopefully those numbers down the road in the near future can go up a lot more, and we can see more positive ratings increases from NASCAR going into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Dodge. Now, we've talked about Dodge a couple times on this channel over the course of the last week, but on Sunday, and we did a video covering the story, it became officially reported that it sounds like, according to Chris Knight from CashSense.com and Adam Stern from the Sports Business Journal, it sounds like that there is a new manufacturer that will likely be coming back to NASCAR in 2026 in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And according to reports, the leading candidate for that in regards to manufacturers right now is Dodge. It sounds like Dodge is a leading candidate to join the Truck Series full-time in 2026 with the Ram brand. It also needs to be known they're streamlining some of the stuff for the Truck Series going forward that will help the cost a little bit. That will make it a little bit easier for the Ram and Dodge brand to come in. But there's more to this story than meets the eye that I did not mention in the original video. According to the same report, it sounds like Dodge is looking for an engine manufacturer to work with so they could join the Cup Series potentially full-time in 2028. This is absolutely huge. I remember when Steve Phelps had said there was a new manufacturer that'd be coming in, or a former manager coming back into the sport, and I thought it was a little bit BS, to be honest with you, but this report coming out is absolutely huge. Dodge has not been in NASCAR in any way, shape, or form since around 2016. They still have support with their Ram brand until 2016 with the Zombie Dodges before they had the new regulations come in 2017. And they dropped their support around 2013 after Dodge left the Cup Series at the end of 2012, which of course Team Penske was able to win the championship that year. And there's been rumors about Dodge coming back in recent years, going back to 2021 at the end of that year during the State of Sport address. Steve Phelps has said that they've been talking to Dodge about coming back. There's a lot of things going on over at the Stellantis company that really caused them to not stick around long term, and those rumors died in the middle of 2022. RFK had been talking to them, but there was really no progress made in the months leading up to that point, considering that Jack Roush still has major ownership over there. They're probably not switching to Dodge, at least for the foreseeable future. But let's talk about Dodge for a second. So if this is true, and I think it's very likely at this point, here's some reasons why I think this is happening. They've brought a lot of key people back over to the Stellantis brand, and I think having the Stellantis group over there, and basically some of the big changes are happening. Apparently some of the old CEOs have come back, and some of the old key players that really played in the Dodge's growth in the 2000s in NASCAR. It sounds like they're very interested in coming back, and they've been hired on in recent months and in recent weeks as well. And they're talking about bringing the VA back as well. So now you speculate what teams in the Truck Series could switch over to Dodge in 2026. I think there's a very obvious one, and that is ThorSport Racing. ThorSport Racing has been switching manufacturers left, right, and center. They started with Chevrolet, then they switched over to Ford, then they actually Toyota for a few years after 2009. Then they switched over to Ford in 2018. Then they switched back to Toyota for a couple years, and then they went back to Ford in 2023 because Hailie Deegan ended up joining the team in 2023. And they've stayed with Ford ever since for the last couple years, and they did win a championship with Ford in 2024. But if there is going to be a team that is going to make a move and switch manufacturers going forward, I do think it is going to be Thorsport Racing. It makes the most sense. They're known for switching manufacturers. I think they'll be the most likely to switch in 2026. The other team I look at is Nice Motorsports. Nice Motorsports, they do have an alliance, I believe, with McAnally Hilgeman Racing currently at the moment right now, but they're a team that's kind of taken a step backwards in the last couple years, especially since Carson Osmar left the program. And while Caden Honeycutt, I think, is going to be good this year, I think he's probably going to be the only driver that's full-time this year that I do think that has a chance and opportunity to be really strong in 2025. I think Nice going over being one of the lead Dodge brands would make a lot of sense. And I could see one of the smaller teams like a Rayum down the road switching over, though they've got Frankie Muniz right now. I could see them down the road switching over. And I could see some other teams down the road switching over, like it's CR7. I could see one of those teams switching over and maybe doing that in 2026. And then you got to think about the Cup Series, right? If they do get a new manufacturer in Cup like Dodge in 2028 and Honda down the road, which they're rumored to be coming to NASCAR, it seems like those rumors are very highly at this point. I look for a couple teams to switch at that point. One of them being Trackhouse. Trackhouse Racing, they're not a top-level Chevy team. They're in the second-tier Chevrolet organization, and I think that they're at a crossroads currently at the moment. Very similar to Joe Gibbs Racing. I think Jared brought this up on his channel. This feels very similar to Trackhouse Racing, right? Or not to Joe Gibbs Racing when they were with Chevrolet. And then, of course, Joe Gibbs Racing switched over to Toyota, and they became maybe one of the best organizations in the last 2 decades. People questioned it originally, and then they had a ton of success, and then people were no longer questioning it anymore. To me, I think Trackhouse is the most likely. I don't see Spire switching. I thought maybe a few years ago the Spire would have switched from the Andretti stuff, but I don't see them switching. Legacy could be one of those teams to watch out for. Maybe they go back over to Dodge. That could certainly be a possibility. And I could also see maybe down the road like Colleague Racing switching over. Colleague would absolutely make the most sense to me as well. I know they've got a really tight alliance with RCR this year, but I think that they're going to have to realize if they're going to want to be super, super fast and super competitive down the road, I think switching over to Dodge could really help them. Colleague is at a crossroads right now. They're not in the best position currently at the moment. And I think for the team to have a chance and opportunity to be successful, plus AJ's had experience with Dodges when he drove for Penske in 2011 and 2012 around that time, I think it makes a lot of sense for Dodge to work with those organizations. But I think it's huge that Dodge is coming back to NASCAR next year. I think we're going to be getting announcements on that really, really soon. I think it's a huge deal that it's happening at this point, and we'll see what happens, and we'll see which teams do decide to go ahead and switch over to Dodge if they do come into the sport. But the fact there's a lot of talk, conversation about that from even Mopar insiders, and they're likely going to be going Cup racing the next couple years as well. As feels very similar when the Toyota came into the sport. They started off with the Truck Series in 2004, and they switched to Cup in 2007. It had to focus on all 3 series. I think having that makes a lot of sense. I also look at those torque sensors they're adding. I think that's a big thing to look at as well. They've added some torque sensors recently, which I do think that some teams are looking at that for new engines and other engine brands like hybrid engines that could be coming down the road in the not-so-distant future as well. But I look for some teams to be announcers switching over to Dodge in the next couple of years very, very soon. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, there has been a lot of talk and conversation surrounding Junior Motorsports and their future in the NASCAR Cup Series after they competed in this year's Daytona 500. Junior Motorsports, of course, able to qualify for the Daytona 500 with Justin Allgaier, and they had a really solid and really strong debut. They survived a lot of the big crashes and big carnages at the end of the race, and they were able to finish inside the top 10 in 9th place. And after the race had concluded, Dale Jr. has said, do I want to be in the NASCAR Cup Series? Do I want to be prepared for it? Do I want to make the move to NASCAR Cup competition? And Dale Jr. said after the checker flag had flown, he said, yes, I do want to go ahead and be in Cup down the road, and we're going to be basically in the charter game going forward into the future. I think the facts are there. I think for the first time, at least in a couple years, I think there definitely is a very realistic possibility that Junior Motorsports could have a full-time NASCAR Cup Series program in 2026. But that's not it at this point. There is a potential possibility that Junior Motorsports could make more NASCAR Cup starts in 2025. On the Dale Jr. down this past week, Jr. did not say that he is not coming back to Cup at all. He did say that if the right partner comes around and the Travel Whiskey brand wants to run it back like they did at Daytona with Chris Stapleton, they will do it once again. Now, they did not announce any tracks, any more races that they are going to do, but I think the fact that they are talking about it tells me they've probably got something up their sleeve. I would have to think if they're going to make more starts in 2025, one, they're probably going to choose Justin Allgaier again. That would absolutely make the most sense in my opinion. And I also do think that they'll probably run like Talladega. Maybe they run a shorter oval like a Bristol. Maybe at the end of the year, maybe they do run the All-Star race because open cars can run that event. Maybe they run a road course with Connor Zilisch. I could see that being a possibility because Connor's only got one start scheduled currently at the moment right now with Trackhouse Racing, even though I do think he'll make more than just the one start than he's making currently at the moment right now. But I do think that the big thing is going to be partners. I think if they want to make more starts this year, they're going to have to find partners, and I think just having one partner ain't going to be enough for them. But I look at Hellman's, I look at Budweiser, right? Especially since Junior's got the Budweiser stuff back and they've ran it in the late models, it make a lot of sense. Maybe do like the throwback race at Darlington. But talking about 2026 and the future of this team, I do think there's a very good chance that possibly the Junior Motorsports could have a full-time NASCAR Cup program in 2026 that is chartered. And Dale Jr. did say today that he would not want to basically do it just by him paying all the money for the charter. He would like to have investors involved. But he did say he could put as little as around 20 to 25% in. If charters go to $40 million, as they basically stand, even though they've dropped a lot in value, if they end up being around $20 to $25 million, then Dale Jr. will be only putting around $5 to maybe even $6 or $7 million in that charter, maybe around $8 million at tops, which is a lot cheaper than putting in, let's say, $40 million altogether. Now, if charters go up to around $40 million, then Dale Jr. will be paying only around $10 million to get a charter, if he's only paying 20 to 25% on that. The big question is, who would he partner up with? Now, maybe he partners up with Trackhouse Racing in some way, shape, or form. That could certainly be a possibility. One theory that I've kind of thought about recently in the last couple weeks, I think about the 99 car for Trackhouse Racing. We know that Pitbull is no longer working at Trackhouse Racing currently at the moment. What if Dale Jr. got association with that number 99 car, and that would be the Junior Motorsports Cup car in 2026, where Junior Motorsports and Trackhouse own it maybe like equally 50-50, and Connor Zilisch is the driver. It would make a lot of sense. Trackhouse and Junior Motorsports have really close ties going into the year. They're getting sponsorship from, of course, the Trackhouse brand, like the Protect Your Melon sponsorship we talked about not too long ago. I think that would make a lot of sense for that to happen. And I think that Connor Zilisch, who I think is going to be really strong in Cup competition next year, it would make a lot of sense, especially also with the fact that Shane Van Gisbergen and, of course, Ross Chastain are going to make select starts with Junior Motorsports in the number 9 car that we'll be talking about in a video later today. I think that would make a lot of sense. I really would love to see Junior Motorsports have the chance and opportunity to go full-time NASCAR Cup racing in 2026. And the big question many of you are going to be asking me, do I think it's very realistic that they are a full-time NASCAR Cup team in 2026? Yes. I don't think Dale Jr., though, is going to own the charter fully. I think Dale Jr. will be looking to try to get investors to invest in the car, like a Chris Stapleton, like a Justin Mars, like somebody else like that, to do that. I think that's the one thing to watch out for. So the big question we have to ask ourselves now is, who would be the full-time driver if they were to be a full-time NASCAR Cup team in 2026? Well, I think Justin Allgaier would make a lot of sense. Justin Allgaier's been with Junior Motorsports now for about a decade at this point, and next year will exactly be a decade since he joined the team in the program. So I do think that would absolutely make a lot of sense for Allgaier. I don't see Sammy Smith being ready to make the jump up the Cup at this point. Sammy Smith, I think, is improved as a driver, but I don't see Sammy Smith going into that car and being a major factor in serious contender behind the wheel. Carson Quaffle, I like Carson a lot, very talented, but I don't think he's ready for Cup competition at this point. Connor Zilisch and Justin Allgaier are the only two that make sense. If the Trackhouse thing does happen down the road, I could see that being a possibility with basically Connor Zilisch driving a Junior Motorsports Trackhouse beneficiary car. That could certainly be a possibility as well. But I think in regards to Junior Motorsports and their future in the sport, and basically Junior Motorsports and them going Cup racing, I do think it's very likely a possibility that's going to happen. And I think that we'll get to see Junior Motorsports down the road have a NASCAR Cup program, which I think is absolutely huge and a really big deal for the sport as a whole. So we'll see if it ends up happening, and we'll see if JRM does in fact have a NASCAR Cup Series program potentially in 2026. We'll see if that does happen in the not-so-distant future. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me through Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Junior Motorsports actually will have a NASCAR Cup program in 2026 or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what teams you think will switch to Dodge in the Truck Series next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There will be a second NASCAR news video dropping on the channel in the next couple hours. You'll be seeing probably around 11 or 12 o'clock today. Then, of course, we will be doing reactions maybe to Xfinity Series qualifying. If there's any major news that does break later today, we'll discuss here live on the channel. Then, of course, tomorrow we're going to have reactions, of course, to NASCAR Cup qualifying, and we're going to have the Truck and Xfinity Series reviews. Then on Sunday, we're going to have the NASCAR Cup review from Atlanta. We're going to have the starting lineup video, and, of course, we are going to have potentially a Shane Van Gisbergen video dropping as well. Depending on his performances, we'll be talking about people like Haley Ding and Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Hurts, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, the lawsuit with 23 in front row, Michael Jordan, Connor Zilisch, Carson Quaffle, Chandler Smith, Eric Almirola, Michael McDowell, all the good stuff. Frankie Muniz, Clay Safar, all the good stuff we'll be talking about on the channel relatively soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.